It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025, and it's time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 331 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. Verse. I am Mac, and I'm joined by my friend, a connoisseur of comedy, a great man, not just the first option, the best option, Mr. Lumgaluka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And for the next hour, we are going to talk about topics ranging from news, history, trivia, and everything in between as they relate to our favorite hobby, Vidya-gaming. But first, Mr. Nice Guy, it's been a couple weeks since we've been able to get together. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing good, and I'm sitting here sweating. You know, we do the recording on the night of my laser tag league, and I'm about to be a new age tomorrow. Tomorrow's my birthday. And you know what I've found in my X number of years on this earth is there's few things more satisfying than finding like-minded people and being able to partake in a hobby that you enjoy with like-minded people, regardless of age, regardless of economics, regardless of race, regardless of all that stuff. Like, there's certain things that just bring people together, and it's great to do those things. Video games is one. This podcast is certainly one. Laser tag is another, and there's just so many things. And so I had a really fun time in laser tag today. There's people in their 20s. There are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. There's college-educated people. There are more blue-collar people. There's what I would guess to be a 12-year-old kid who comes with his dad, and none of that matters. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you make, where you live, what you're doing, what you look like. It's just, let's have fun and let's bond, and I love doing that. And so those are the types of hobbies and those type of people that I will always surround myself with. So life is good, Mac. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I did some adult stuff over the weekend and got like an early jump on my taxes, which, that's how old I am, that I feel like that is something that should bear mentioning on a podcast. So, I'm old. But I'm glad that we're both aging together, my dude, and happy birthday tomorrow, of course.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Well, good. And on that note, man, I say we do what we do best, and we hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Mr. Nice Guy, I'm out of the loop. What is new in Vidya-gaming?
There is so much, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode number 331 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, this first news story I find fascinating because it kind of goes with a theme that we've seen over the years on who should have input in video games and who should not. This is on GameSpot.com, written by Evan Campbell. Title is GTA Trevor Actor Wants a Very Definitive Exit in GTA 6. Here is what Evan writes. First to hello, then sent to hell. That's the scenario the actor behind Grand Theft Auto 5's Trevor would like to see for the character in Grand Theft Auto 6. While Stephen Ogg hasn't reportedly done any work on the next entry in the franchise, he'd love to see Trevor pass the torch to new leads in a way that sees his brains turning into pink goo. Speaking with Screen Rant, Ogg explained that his wish for GTA 5 is, quote, if Trevor appeared in it just to be killed at the beginning, that would be a full circle moment for Trevor if Rockstar followed along with Ogg's suggestion. That's because Trevor kills GTA 4, the lost and damned protagonist Johnny Klebitz in GTA 5. Pass the torch, stomp Trevor's head in, and sort of put an end to all that and allow a new generation to take over. So, Mac, I'm super interested in your thoughts on this. Like, just the idea of an actor saying, hey, here's what I think should happen. And as a backdrop, like, I want to point out that in the past, we've seen game endings, like, altered due to community feedback. Like, Mass Effect 3, people were super angry by the ending. I haven't played it. And I believe that it was actually changed by the people. You know, we've seen other smaller changes throughout the year to things like loot boxes, things that are more hardware-based, like being able to share your game on a console. What do you think about a voice actor's input on their character?
Oh, I think it's great. But also, I think it's particularly apro in this moment because it wasn't just somebody saying like, I think the new game should show me as king of the universe, and I should be able to act out those lines. No, it's like literally him saying, hey, we started the previous game in the franchise by basically having my character take out the other one, or the previous one. Why not start the new one by having my character get taken out in the same poetic way? I actually think that's great. That's got to be like a hard sell. If you're trying to engage someone for a creative endeavor, be like, yeah, we'd like to bring you back to immediately end your life in the franchise. Is that an insulting thing to say to somebody? To be like, hey, we loved your work. Come back so we can kill you. I actually think that this is quite lovely. Maybe I misunderstand the circumstance, but I think that the actor who portrayed Trevor is, I think that's a great suggestion, and I would love for them to take it to heart. Seems great.
Now, not sure if it makes any difference, but Mac, for context, and I know you probably have not played GTA 5, but the guy who plays Trevor is also in The Walking Dead, and he's in Better Call Saul. Stephen Ogg. If you were to Google him, you would probably recognize him immediately. Phenomenal actor. Because you've watched Better Call Saul, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, phenomenal actor. Not that acting skill has anything to do with the validity of his opinion. I don't fully disagree with you, but I lean the opposite direction. I've let the writers write the game.
Okay.
I feel like Rockstar has done a really good job over decades of hiring writing teams and of putting together stories that are very gripping, satirical, and hit the points of what is going on in society at the time.
Okay.
Like, the social commentary is just brilliant. And so I don't think that having Trevor come back and die would take away from that, but I just don't want them to be distracted by trying to shoehorn any other type of agenda into the game. Just make your game, let the community be hands off, let the actors, the voice actors and actresses be hands off, just do you, and ultimately, if the community wants to see an end to Trevor, they can do that through mods. I believe there was a mod that allowed you to dig up CJ from San Andreas, who was a former protagonist in GTA 5. You could dig him up at some point in that via mods. And so, I don't know. I just think that the input from the community is important, but not when it comes to storylines. Let's just let the writers do what they do. The other thing I'll say is, at the end of GTA 5, spoiler alert, for those who have not played it, turn off your headsets. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I know for a fact that you had the option to kill Trevor completely. Mm-hmm. There's 3 protagonists, really. Michael, Trevor, and someone else. I can't remember all their names. Franklin. And I remember I killed Trevor, and then I regretted it. And I was trying to go back to an old save and be like, can I bring him back and just let him continue to exist as I continue to go through this world? And I couldn't. So there's already a scenario where he potentially dies. It's not definitive that he's still alive based on what choice you made. So for that reason, I disagree.
In counterpoint, I've definitely seen plenty of times where the writers had a plan, they had an idea, they had a notion, and completely fumbled it, and I felt like community suggestions as to what would make for better writing had actually, really been better. But, who knows? It's engaging in complete speculation, and maybe they do have a good plan. I think it's cool that somebody would be willing to come back just to be immediately killed off. And I mean, I don't know the guy, but I did look up his face, and yeah, I recognize him from Better Call Saul. But I certainly get the impression from that sort of a thing that it's like, he doesn't seem like he's got a huge ego to please with the idea of coming back. Just to be, to have the poetic.
No. I think that it's a pure thing. I would imagine that he's doing just fine. You never know. Oh. But I don't think that this is an ego thing or I want to check thing. I think it's Trevor was beloved and hated. Yeah. Let's end this story. I get it.
Yeah. I couldn't say it any better. Absolutely, 100%.
Well, cool. So let's move on, Mac. Let's talk about something a little bit closer to home for you. This is about Pokemon. On Kotaku.com, written by Kenneth Shepard. If you're the type of Pokemon fan who cares about collecting every variation of its 1,000 plus monsters, that means constantly seeking out special events to receive a rare critter or searching for hours to find one with a low spawn rate hiding in tall grass. Shiny Pokemon are the rarest of the rare, with a color scheme different from the regular versions of any given pocket monster. We're going to skip a little bit ahead. Good news. 2 of them are finally being made available because there were some that were shiny locked, Mac. Although you'll have to complete the entire Pokedex in Pokemon Legends Arceus or Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl to claim them. Enormous was one of the new Pokemon introduced in Legends Arceus and has been shiny locked since her debut in 2022. Game Freak is giving a shiny version out to anyone who has completed the Haisu Pokedex and deposited those Pokemon into the Pokemon Home Storage app. So if you've caught all the Pokemon in Legends Arceus and registered the completed Pokedex in Home, you'll be rewarded with a shiny Enamorus, a brighter shade of pink than her normal form. Mac, they're also doing this with another Pokemon, so bottom line, they're giving away some Pokemon that were previously unobtainable. Is this something that excites you? As someone who maybe even hasn't played the more recent ones, like, do you like this? Does this get you hyped as a collector of Pokemon vintage version? Or is this too niche to really be a news story, dude?
I'm just going to lay it out there. I don't get the shiny Pokemon, enthusiasm. I understand capturing your Pokemon, adding them to the Pokedex. I understand a completion, but the shiny notion just never really hit home for me. Although I do recognize that there are many people who like that stuff, and I'm glad that this opens up vistas that were previously closed, and I'm happy for all of them. It does nothing for me. Nothing, Lum. How dare you come here with such a weak sauce news?
Dude, I'm just asking. You know what? It's funny because if you would have said, I was actually just thinking in the moment, I was like, if he says this is a big deal, I'm going to ask him what the difference is between Pokemon and NFTs. Rest in peace to NFTs. It's so funny. Like, I think back to that period where NFTs were really popping and everyone was against them. And I was like, guys, this is kind of a cool idea. Like, it's not really that different than what we're doing in collecting video games. I will completely take the L on that. I was completely wrong on NFTs. And there are still people launching NFTs to this day and then rug pulling their community. Mm-hmm. You're a terrible person if that's you. And I think NFTs are absolutely silly now. But this Pokemon thing, not quite the same.
Sure.
You're getting it for your time, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that if you're a collector and you're a super fan, it's probably kind of cool to say, hey, I put all these hours in and now they're giving me something that I could not obtain before. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, no, agreed 100%. If you're into shiny Pokemon, this is probably definitely fantastic news for you. But, shiny wasn't my thing.
And Mac, just to do kind of a quote-unquote good deed with what reach that we have
Let's do it.
in the podcast world, I just want to let people know that there is a new Humble Bundle launched to support the LA fire relief efforts. So far, $340,000 has been raised. And if you know anything about Humble, you can go to humblebundle.com. Or is it just humble.com? Let's look. Google Humble Bundle. And in fact, as soon as I go to the webpage, it looks like this is popping up as a promo to support the Los Angeles fire relief. Now, in terms of cost, as I'm scrolling here, there's a book bundle, there's a learn to code bundle, and there's also a software bundle. There's a comic bundle, and then there's another software bundle. So there's a lot of stuff you can do, whatever you're into. You can spend a few dollars, and in my experience, these bundles are often much more value in price than what you were paying for. So if that's your thing and you want to support these LA fires, condolences to all those losing their houses and things that are going on there, this is a great way to support. So it does. And my understanding of how Humble works, at least with these types of charitable things, is it's obviously a lot of game companies, devs, or in this case, book publishers or writers coming together and saying, yes, we will, I assume, give a part of our book sale. Like we'll put our book up and effectively donate a digital copy of it so that the money can go towards this cause.
Yeah.
And I think that's dope. So
yeah.
Do your own research. but I think it's something that you may want to consider supporting, and that has been our news for the week.
Well, now that we've taken a look at what's going on around us right now, let's take a little look into the past. Mr. Nice Guy, we've had some fantastic games that have came out over the past couple of weeks. First and foremost, I think in 2018, a little title called Celeste that I know is one of our favorites. Mr. Nice Guy, I want to put you on the spot in a second and ask you to just describe one of your favorite moments from the game. I'll start off by sharing one of mine. There is this scene in between levels where you are basically on a gondola going around, and there is more or less kind of this mini game of making a feather float. And the idea, is that you in the game, the character, is very anxious about this malfunctioning gondola, and you're encouraged to breathe along with the feather floating. In order to, and you sort of follow it along. And like I said, it's kind of like a mini game for you to do that. But I didn't realize when I was playing it the first time around how very in the game I was, until I found myself breathing along with this mini game. And I was just like, man, how ridiculously effective was this at just bringing me completely into the world, into the universe, and into everything that you have me breathing along with the mini game. And yeah, there's just lots of moments like that in Celeste, but that one really stands out to me. Mr. Nice Guy, do you have one to share?
Yeah, I absolutely do, and I'm glad you didn't share the same one that I'm going to share. Mine is more of an Easter egg and a reference to what I believe is the best Mario game of all time, Super Mario Bros. 3. There's a moment in Celeste where you come across a white block. And anyone who played Mario 3 growing up or at some point knows that white blocks in Mario mean you can go jump on them, press down for 3 seconds or so, and you will fall into the background. And when I saw this block in Celeste, I immediately knew, like, oh, this is a moment that's referencing a big part of my childhood, and I was so pleased when I jumped on that block, pressed down, and fell behind. Which, people who are playing Celeste and they're 10 years old when it came out may not have known that, but for us retro gamers, it was a very cool nod to one of the best games ever.
I don't even know where I learned that you could do that with the white blocks. No idea. I don't know if you remember who showed you.
I honestly don't, but it's one of those things where I almost wonder if, someone had a friend who was allowed to call the Nintendo helpline.
Yep, and could spend that $1 a minute.
Yeah,
Woo!
Yeah, which is wild to think about. But then they spread it to someone else, and it became an urban legend, and eventually it became common knowledge before the internet. So that's probably how.
My headcanon is going to be that it was Jace who did it. Jace was a kid I went to elementary school with, and his uncle worked at Nintendo, of course.
I knew it was coming.
There was one on every schoolyard, somebody whose uncle worked at Nintendo.
Yeah.
And sometimes, who knows? I'm going to credit Jace. Jace, you're the real MVP. So Celeste, fantastic game. If you haven't played it, if you don't own a copy, go out, get one, play it. Fantastic. One other game that came out this past couple of weeks in 1998 that had an outsized, I would say, impact on me for a variety of reasons is Resident Evil 2. Now, Nice Guy, we've been doing this show long enough. You probably remember, so I hope you'll bear with me that Resident Evil 2 is a game that I played. I originally watched it being played. My brother-in-law, he had just barely married my sister. I walked over to their house because we were in the same town at the time. It was like 3 or 4 blocks away, and I watched him play Resident Evil 2. Scared me to absolute death, and then I had to walk home in the dark at night after that. I knew that zombies were coming at me from the things. It was late enough at night. There wasn't really that much traffic. So, like, I walked in the middle of the street so that I could get the best view of both sides of the street. I knew those zombies were coming. And it wasn't until way later that I ever got up the courage to play Resident Evil 2. And yeah, I think I didn't beat it until, gosh, I want to say maybe 2004 or so on. It took a long time before I tried to beat it myself.
So let me ask you this real quick, because there are certain games that I have never played a single entry in the IP, and Resident Evil is one of them. And I was watching someone play Resident Evil, like on TikTok or something, the other day, and I thought, I have got to give this franchise a try. So what's my entry point? Is it Resident Evil 4? Is the story literally fluid enough that I need to find Resident Evil 1? What's your opinion?
Nice guy, if you're looking to get into Resident Evil, I just have a question for you. 2 questions. Do you like playing with a partner? And do you want action horror or do you want survival horror?
Like, okay, so when you say partner, like NPC or like a real person?
Yeah.
Co-op?
Well, either co-op.
I don't want to play. I don't necessarily want to play with an NPC, like those.
Okay.
Those like rescue missions, like follow me and you suck with a gun. Like those are not fun to me. But I would say probably action horror. But I mean, the Last of Us was survival horror in some ways, so I could go either way on that question.
So I would say I think you're going to like Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 because you can play with a partner, and the NPC that you can play with in Resident Evil 5, pretty enjoyable. Now, also Resident Evil 2 in its remake is a lot more action horror than it is survival horror. So I think you would be well served by that as well. So Resident Evil 2 Remake has more of the action vibes to it, whereas Resident Evils 1, 2, and 3 very much more survival horror. So either 4, 5, or Resident Evil 2 Remake, I would say, for an entry point for you. Great question, though. But there is one other thing I wanted to throw out there about Resident Evil 2, and that is that they started work on Resident Evil 2 about a month after Resident Evil 1 was finished. They managed to get like half of the same staff from the first game to come on for Resident Evil 2, which sort of led to a lot of, the very good continuity vibes between the two games. And then they got a long way in the build, probably maybe 70% complete of a game of Resident Evil 2, and then they went back and kind of scrapped it and went back to square one on the storyline, on assets, and kind of basically everything in it. And there's still some builds of this Resident Evil 1.5 that you can see and even have a go at floating around on the interwebs. And I think Resident Evil 2 might be one of the first PlayStation games to use like an adaptive music scheme in it. I could be wrong about that one, but they definitely had situations where you would get different music based on different enemies, silence if there were some enemies around, music if areas were clear. It seems like a simple thing, but it really, really helped crank up the horror vibes in Resident Evil 2. So it was pretty good time.
So either 5, 2, or 4.
Yeah, either 5, 2 remake, or 4.
Got to wish list them on Steam and wait for that sale. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I've got 5 on Steam, so if you do fancy playing that and you want a partner for it,
hey,
put me in, coach.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what I had today for video games happenings this last couple of weeks.
Love to hear it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our topic of the week.
Woohoo.
A segment in gaming where we talk about something relevant and discuss our opinions on it. Mac, we got some big news not long ago, and we didn't record last week, so this is our first time getting to talk about it. The Switch 2 has officially been announced by Nintendo, and there's an article here on IGN.com by Ryan Dinsdale that says hands-on invites go out to fans today. Nintendo has today invited fans from across the world to get hands-on with the Nintendo Switch 2 ahead of its release. Those who registered for a hands-on event, which are taking place in the U.S., in New York, Los Angeles, and Dallas, have taken to social media to celebrate receiving an invitation to share their misery at missing out. I won't read the thing that says congratulations, blah, 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 but the article goes on to say it's unclear what Nintendo will showcase at the events, though as they take place after the April Nintendo Direct, they could include games revealed there and not just Mario Kart 9. Mac, we talked before, and you said that you did get to see the Nintendo Switch 2 release video.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear your thoughts generally and hear your level of hype or level of gripe. I just had to rhyme.
No, I appreciate the rhyme. All right, so from a sort of tech geekery standpoint of things, a couple things that stood out. Obviously, bigger screen. You've got your kickstand, more USB-C ports. There's one on the bottom, one on the top, of course, now. Also, the change up in the controller connectors. I don't know for sure, but the design I don't know designer, but like the sort of tech geek in me looks at those ports where they're going to plug in, the controllers are going to plug in on the side, and can't help but think like, man, I sure hope that's not the common failure point, because they just don't look like they're going to be robust enough.
Okay.
But then again, I have had no hands-on time with them, so no idea, complete speculation. But as far as hype, it looks nice. It looks like it's going to be an improvement. Hype, there will be backwards compatibility. As we know, that's not something that Nintendo tends to do. Usually the catalog of games from before is incompatible until they do some sort of thing where they, sell you the ROMs. But that's the way it goes for Nintendo's backwards compatibility. It's usually not much of a thing. So great news. Great news.
I will say I don't want to give them too much credit for that, because I would assume that a big part of that is that Switch file size is going to mean that they would need to put a reasonable amount of storage space in the Switch 2, right? In order, if they wanted to resell those Switch games, just because they're so big, and Nintendo has never really been the best at hard drive space. My thoughts generally are I'm not like super excited. Anytime a new console comes out, there's a certain level of hype that I feel. And the fact that it can play some stuff that my old one couldn't play, and Mario Kart, we didn't really even get a new one with Switch. We just got Mario Kart 8, and then they added some DLC levels. So I'm excited for that because it's such a fun, iconic party family game, and I will be excited to do that online. In terms of the design, I like the form factor. I like that it's bigger. It's kind of funny how we go in cycles with hardware, Mac, where like first we had, phones that were big. Like, oh, this is big, but it can fit in your pocket. And then it's like, oh, look how small this is. Look how thin it is. And now, we shift towards, oh, we want a bigger version of this because the screen, we want it to be bigger. We don't know if this is going to be an OLED. I hope and pray that they don't take a step backwards and give us something that's less than an OLED. I also hope that this has 4K capability. I don't believe there's been any announcement in that regard. A question for you, Mac, as someone who's into tech maybe a little bit more than me, multiple USB-C ports. Obviously, one could be used for charging. Like, just thinking out loud, what do you think the other one could be for? The extra USB-Cs?
Well, definitely for outputting video. You could probably do that just through the power port if you had a dock. What about one of those lights? The external squiggly light thingy?
You know what? That would be a cool throwback. And I bet that there's probably like a USB-C light that you could find and plug in.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I don't know if Nintendo
but real
makes
talk,
one.
Real talk, I don't know. I will say though, since you gave me a shot, I'm gonna take it. A couple other things that I remembered about the specs is it should have, the Switch 2 is supposed to have about triple the RAM that the Switch 1 did. It had about 4 gigs. This one's supposed to have 12. And even though when the Switch launched, they were rocking a processor. They're rocking the same general style of processor, but it's a little smaller. What's interesting is they opted for like a 2020 model of CPU, but when the Switch came out, they used a 2012 model of CPU.
Seriously?
So, it's about the same. Oh, yeah. Yeah, what did... hang on, I've got it here.
In 2017. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they used the Cortex A57, and that was a 2012 model. Now they're using the Cortex A78C, which is a 2020 chip. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's less expensive. I don't know, but nonetheless, that's just some of the improvements, because it will be a much more powerful in comparison processor, though, even though it is a little bit older.
That's super interesting, and not to get like too nerdy, but I know oftentimes when I'm reading about cars and things like that, because newer cars are often heavily computer-based, right?
Yeah, be careful, everybody. Mr. Nice Guy's going to get nerdy on a show called Two Nerds in a Pod. We can't have this.
Gonna get a little bit nerdy. Well, people often say, don't buy a car that was made in 2020 or 2021 because of what was going on in the world with supply line issues and chip shortages. Maybe some things were rushed. Maybe the quality control wasn't quite where it should be. And some of those vehicles and other tech things made in 2020 may not be as good quality or as durable or whatever. And so it's interesting that Nintendo is using a chip from 2020, not just because we're 5 years out, but because they could have easily gone another direction based on what was going on in the world.
I want to say that this one is like a 5 or 7 nanometer or something, and they haven't really quite gotten much farther smaller than that. So even though it is a 2020 chip, a 2020 design spec, for a while now they've been hitting these sort of diminishing returns levels in miniaturization of stuff. So I mean, it is an old spec, but it still works out just fine, and the new stuff isn't that much better. So yeah, it's just amusing that it's the 2020 for precisely the reasons that you said. But who knows? Maybe 5 years on, they've figured out the quality control issues.
Yeah, right. when they release the mid-gen update. Well, here's what I'll say. I'm both disappointed and impressed with Nintendo, because this is something we all knew was coming. In fact, the day and date that the announcement was going to come is something that was public knowledge. That was quote unquote leaked well before. And so it would have been tempting if it was me to say, what, we can't just announce this. We've got to let the people know something else that's exciting about this. Some of the other software, some of the specs, some of the new features.
Mario Kart 9, Mr. Nice Guy.
And that was it. And I think that's exciting, but I think that they probably have so much more up their sleeve, and they resisted the urge to push that out, even though their thunder was stolen by the internet. So that impresses me. It also frustrates me because I want more. I want to know why I should buy this. But I'm a 7 out of 10 on the excitement scale. I'm excited, but cautiously optimistic. Mac, anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah, what happens to the wayward switches in the nice guy household once you get that Switch 2? Is this hand-me-down territory?
It might be. Is Mac looking for one? I'll tell you this. The 2017 Switch is beat up. So, but I don't know, man. The Switch OLED, I might be feeling generous. We'll see. Are you looking
I'm
for
not
a Switch?
angling for that. I was just curious, which of the kids, who gets the hand-me-down? How does that work out? Although we don't have to go completely into nice guy family dynamics.
Yeah. You're good.
But
I mean, to your point, so, having a dad who's a gamer, my kids just don't get how lucky they are. We have the PS5, we have the Xbox, and I have this PC and other things we have, arcade machines, etc. And so the Switches honestly are the least played pieces of gaming hardware in the house. So, I mean, they'll still be here, and whoever wants to play them can play them, but usually it's the youngest two that are playing those. And the 2017 that I bought at launch has been beat to heck. The OLED is still in really good condition. So that's it. Well, that has been our topic of the week, y'all.
All right, well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. You know it, you love it. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I'm posting a link in the chat right now to this crowdfunding project. It's called Fade. It is meant to be a 3D action RPG, heavily inspired by Dark Souls and Fable in respect to mechanics and direction, and Full Metal Alchemist in story. So it's meant to be, it's meant to be this sort of Dark Soulsy combat, and meant to have these sorts of okay, look, real talk. I didn't watch Full Metal Alchemist, okay? So, like, I understand that there were homunculi, and, like, that was a thing, and those were the villains of the story, and there were all these things. So you've got these big sort of monsters going around, and you gotta defeat them, and, I mean, there you go. That's a dark fantasy action RPG for you. You know, there. Full Metal Alchemist in a nutshell. So before everybody comes for me, I am so sorry. But yeah, so this game does have a lot of the hallmarks of a classic, level ups and RPGs, and having actually played Dark Souls, it does have some similar vibes there. It also has a sort of flask mechanic, as Dark Souls was very notable for, healing through flasks. It does make a point of offering a sort of flask customization as well, so that you can have your flasks, when you heal, do extra things. I thought that was a nice touch. The game itself, as you're looking over it, it's a $10,000 goal for the game, which it has exceeded as of this recording. $15 is the minimum buy-in if you want a digital copy of this game, and the expected launch is in October 2026. And then one other note is that this is a solo dev who's now getting help for the animations from a motion capture studio and, of course, voice actors. And that's a lot of what the Kickstarter sort of bills itself as helping to support, getting it finally across this line, as the solo dev has been working hard on it since 2020. I've got some more thoughts, but Mr. Nice Guy, I was hoping to get some of yours.
Yeah, it's really, really, really hard for me to say anything negative about a solo dev. There's strength in teams, but in terms of like executing a vision, as long as you have the work ethic, I believe it's very, very hard to execute a vision as well as you can when you're doing things by yourself, right? There's no dilution. There's no other voices or other hands in the pot. It's just you. I am super, super impressed that he is trying to use motion cap and voice actors to make this as polished an experience as possible. And I don't know anything about the rates that a motion cap studio would charge, but I am sure it's not cheap. For those who don't know, like if you're listening, you probably know, but motion cap is like they have you put on a suit, or they put all these little dots on your face, and they capture your facial expressions, or they capture your movements, or both, to make the game look as realistic as possible. In the past, it was just ragdoll physics. Now it's mocap. That's amazing that he's doing that with this game. Interesting that he's only asking for $10,000. Because
I've got more to say on that, but keep going.
Well, I mean, like I said, studio time and voice actors and actresses, probably not cheap. Like, maybe he is calling in some favors, which, if so, more power to you. But I'm super curious to see how this $10,000 pays for all of that. I'll pause for a minute and leave it at that.
Sure. So this was previously attempted as a Kickstarter in April of last year that did not meet its $50,000 goal back then. And so now it's relaunched with the $10,000. Now you can go back and see the previous Kickstarter, and I will say that objectively, it seems to have improved a lot since that previous Kickstarter. Not just in presentation, like I think a lot of design choices between the previous Kickstarter and this one, like the video focuses on a lot more varied situations, circumstances, shows off better things, whereas the first video had a lot of like, it always seemed to default to the same view, the same static, not quite static image, but the same follow behind, as is just like walking through doors or walking through whatever. And it was very much got old quickly. This one in presentation's a lot better, but also the graphics have notably improved since last year. So it's not like he hasn't done any work. It's obviously done a lot of work. But I think when I see something like that, I think, yeah, 50,000 is probably more like what you kind of need in order to make, something like this happen. I think that usually serves as a good barometer. But we do know that the boost you get from having been a funded Kickstarter is, can be pretty good and can help you get where you want to go. And it feels a little bit like that's the route,
So bonus points for resilience. Like I can only imagine how soul crushing it is to put up a Kickstarter, have it not be funded, but then to bounce back and say, you know what, I really believe in this and I want to get it done. That's great. I think that 10,000 going down to, 50,000 dropping to 10,000 as a goal is a little much. And maybe his hope is that he'll really get 25 and then be able to keep it and then be able to collect more money along the way.
Yeah.
But it is a little frustrating to see someone who probably planned it out and said, I need 50K, to then say, all right, I need 10. And for us to still hope that the game is going to be done. That said, this looks really, really fun. We have a lot of games like this, but I don't think we have too many. And it seems like this kind of takes a unique twist. Like my vision of Dark Souls, and I haven't played a ton, is that it's more of a slow-moving parry-based game. This looks like it actually has some speed to it. And I'm excited for it, and I think it looks good.
Yeah, same. Now, you know me, one of the things that I have to ask about all of the Kickstarter projects is whether or not they can bring together a playable demo, something that shows that you can bring all the disparate parts of a game in order to make a pleasant experience. And I'm happy to report that this one does have a demo, although he certainly could have made that a bit bigger of a thing. There's, right at the top, it goes story, and then it has Steam, Twitter, YouTube, and on Steam is where you will find a demo for the first, couple of bosses. And yet it says basically nothing about that in the entire rest of the Kickstarter project, which is a real missed opportunity, because you should be giving this a shot. And so it looks good. And also that demo, that Steam page has been live since 2020. And it appears, based on the community comments and things like that, that people have been trying it out. The demo, they have been giving feedback, and it's been steadily improving since 2020 when you started work on this game. So obviously very encouraging to see. Let's see. I think, honestly, there are some other things that I can say, but I don't want to belabor the point. I think this is good. I think I like what he's doing and where he's going. And while there are little things that I don't especially like, hey, you try things out, and sometimes it turns out that you've just had canned pineapple your whole life, and it turns out you don't dislike pineapple, you just dislike canned pineapple, and then you take a visit to Mexico and you try fresh pineapple for the first time, and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, my eyes are open. So basically, I'm hoping for a fresh pineapple moment from this Kickstarter, and I like it, and I say kickstart.
That was a very specific analogy, and I feel like there's a
very
story behind
specific.
that.
Shout out to the one person out there who understands that, which is me, because that's Mac's life story, but still.
Nice. I will say kickstart as well. I can think of very few games I've played by solo devs that were bad. And I won't name the ones that I'm thinking of because I don't want to dunk on people. But oftentimes, if a solo dev game gets from start to finish and ends up getting our attention, and when I say our, I mean the royal we, the gaming community, then it ends up being good. So I'm excited for this kickstart.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, obviously we wish the best for everybody, but we are grateful for this one. It looks like Fade is going to be, well, we're excited to see when it comes, when it launches. But that's been Kick or Kickstart.
Next up, it's time for a segment that we like to call Nerd Flex.
A woohoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. If you hear live, you have a job to do. Put your multiple choice gaming-related questions in the chat. But before we do that, we have an announcement from Mac.
Absolutely. So this is a sound test episode. And if you happened to listen to the short episode that we put out for last week, we celebrated 5 years of sound tests. Now, we do have another sound test for you today, but we also have an announcement. On the recommendation of the Nerd Next Door, we're going to be bringing you an additional special bonus episode of the show where we shout out all of our past sound test winners and lay to rest a lot of the older unclaimed sound tests. And so from now on moving forward, instead of just leaving all the sound tests out there for people to guess, we'll just keep about 10 or so at once, and as we introduce a new sound test, we'll lay to rest with our respects. Press F for respects. The previous sound test. So just to sort of show you how that's going to work, for example, in episode 299, we gave you a very specific sound. Mr. Nice Guy, you mind playing that sound for the people?
Okay, I'm going to play it right now.
That sound from episode 291 was from Trackmania United, so that one is no longer up for grabs. But get on it, folks, because those past episodes, those past sound tests before episode 291 are all going to be laid to rest late in probably about a month or so. We're going to wipe out all those unsolved mysteries from 291 and back. But enough hemming and hawing. Now, your sound test for episode 331. Remember to let us know on socials what it is and designate this episode. Sound test 331 coming at you.
Come back when you get some money, buddy.
Nice. So no pressure once again, but for those of you that are here live, if you have a gaming multiple choice related question that is multiple choice, feel free to put it in the chat. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer. But for now, because y'all are talking about the Super Bowl in the chat right now, which is fine. Even though this is a gaming podcast, we are going to go to our special round question that has popped up in the test bank. And I know we haven't done this one yet because I'm drawing a blank, but Mac, here is the question. Name 2 game characters who can't swim. Name 2 game characters who can't swim. Mac, you got anybody?
Wow. I mean, I know there's plenty of them. I think Crash from Crash Bandicoot. I don't think he can swim. Oh man, I felt like I knew some.
I feel like, weren't there some Sonic games where Sonic couldn't swim? Where like you fell in the water and it was just game over?
So like there's 1 or 2 spots where you fall in the water and it's game over, but like a lot of time you were underwater with the bubbles. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of like swimming. Even though you don't swim, you just jump a little more slowly and you have to, things. I think the idea here, I think the spirit of the question isn't just whether or not you can like swim like Mario or whatever, but like whether or not you die going into water.
Okay, fair.
And I feel like there are a lot of like early MMORPGs where you just died in water or you couldn't go into water at all. I'll say Final Fantasy VIII, you could not go into water in that. You just had to like, walk around.
What's the name of the character though? Because it's asking for characters.
Sure. Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. We'll say Crash from Crash Bandicoot.
I'm still going to go with Sonic. I also am pretty sure that in GTA 3, and I can't remember the name of the protagonist, you could not swim. You would go in water and you would just die. I'm trying to think of other games where you can't swim. This is such an interesting question.
I feel like a lot of early games did not allow you to swim, or that was just straight up a barrier.
All
But,
right.
man, yeah.
Well, let's see what we got. Okay, so here's some. We got Spyro.
Oh, yeah. Spyro can't swim.
Abe from Oddworld. John Marston from Red Dead Redemption 1. That's a good one. It's been so long since I played the first one. Frogger and Sly Cooper.
Oh, man. I didn't know most of those. That's a good question. Good
Which
question.
Frogger is interesting. A frog that can't swim. That's fascinating to me. Well, cool. Let's go to our next question. Okay, I don't know the answer, but we're going to go with it. That's not the point, to find ones we know. It's to find a random one. Fighting game question. What game series would you find Soul, Bad Guy, and Chip Z'Nuff? What game series would you find Soul, S-O-L, is how that's spelled, Bad Guy, and Chip Z'Nuff?
So this sounds very punny. It sounds like a LucasArts adventure game. I'm gonna say Grim Fandango.
It says it's a
That's my
fighting
guess.
game series, though.
Fighting game? Oh, shoot. King of Fighters?
Something that sounds satirical. Like, it's been a while since I've played Clay Fighter. But I almost wonder if it's like one of the Clay Fighter games. If those don't sound like Clay Fighter names, though. I'm going to go with Clay Fighter 64 anyway.
Sure, and I'll go with King of Fighters.
All right, final answers. Guilty Gear. I've never played Guilty Gear, so I learned something new today.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so here's one. It's a Rockstar game. In Bully, what is Jimmy's surname? In Bully, what is Jimmy's surname? I am so mad right now because I loved Bully Scholarship Edition on the Nintendo Wii back in the day. There's just only so much gaming knowledge that my brain can hold, and I should know this. But
what do you think? Smith, Samuels, Swampy,
Jimmy.
Swamp, Samsonite.
Vance. I'm going to go Vance. I don't know.
Vance. I'll go Smith.
Final answer. It was Hopkins. Jimmy Hopkins. I would have got it
Hopkins.
eventually. Well, it was a rough week for Nerdflex, but we'll take it. We kind of got the swimming one right. And that has
Yeah.
been our Nerdflex for the week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
As you know, I'm not a lawyer, neither here nor in the UK. But we did mention it last time around. The UK petition for Stop Killing Games. I mentioned, they said that it was only 800 characters, and I kind of wanted to read straight up the text of the UK petition, Mr. Nice Guy, because, like I said, 800 characters total. It's hard to fit, a robust conversation in there. So I kind of want to just throw it out there. I'm going to put a link in the chat real quick in case you want to have a looky-loo as well. And it'll and so basically they have to give the petition in 3 things. They've got the title, which can be like less than 100 characters, a short summary, and then or like the request, specifically like what's your ask? What do you want the UK government to do?
Sure.
And then you can do the why of it. And it breaks down like 100 characters for the title, like 200 characters for the request, or 200 or 300, and then the rest of it in the why. So anyway, you got to be pretty on the spot here. So the title, prohibit publishers irrevocably disabling video games they have already sold. That's the title. The ask is the government should update consumer law to prohibit publishers from disabling video games and related assets and features that they have already sold without recourse for customers to retain or to repair them. We seek this as a statutory consumer right. And then the why, explanation. Most video games sold can work indefinitely, but some have design elements that render the product non-functional at a time which the publisher controls with no date provided at sale. We see this as a form of planned obsolescence, as customers can be deprived of their purchase and cannot retain or repair the video game. We think this practice is hostile to consumers, entirely preventable, and have concerns that existing laws do not currently address the problem. Thus, we believe specific government intervention is needed. And so that's there. Now, we did mention last time around that it has two thresholds. At 10,000 signatures, the government is meant to make a specific response to the request. And at 100,000 signatures, the petition is considered for debate in Parliament. They've got, I believe, just shy of 6 more months, but it's already at 12,000, so they are guaranteed to get a response. What is also interesting, though, is that this is the second time around, as we mentioned last time, because it was previously on the docket, and then they sent it. Basically, they made a response, but the response was such garbage that the government themselves, they sent the response, and then the government themselves clawed it back, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. The new guy was on this one. Here, let us take another crack at that. And then they responded again, and then responded again. It was kind of wild, and then the UK government sort of changed hands, and so then they had to reopen this petition because previous petitions got it. Anyway, point being is that it's open. If you're an OK listener, if you're a UK listener, and you think this is a good thing, then please sign on that petition. Nice guy.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Neither of us are lawyers, but it's time for us to be like, what do we think of the language?
You know what? Here's all I will say about this.
Yeah.
We have, with the power of the internet, there's so much opportunity to stand up for causes that you believe in. And that's something that I love. They can be across the country, across the world. They can be next door, and you can sign a petition and lend your support or your opposition to a cause that you believe in. And I think that that's super important. I won't get too much into the granular aspect and the language, but I do think that as these things come up, if it's something that you're passionate about, please do your research. And if you see the need to lend your financial, your time, your name, or some other type of support to a cause, please do it. But just educate yourself first. Don't jump on everything that comes your way, or take my word for it or Mac's word for it. But for things that you're passionate about, dive in.
Counterpoint, you should trust what Mac says about all things. He will never steer you wrong. I will say I would love for this to have some more details, but my gosh, with a limit of 800 characters, that's pretty decent, you know? I can't imagine myself doing a better encapsulation with just 800 characters. So not too shabby as far as attempts go. I feel like it's a valiant attempt and effort, and I hope it goes somewhere.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but that's been Legalese.
Nice. And now it is time for us to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 331. But before we go, we have a segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool, nerdy stuff we've been into. You know how this works. We've done it, 331 times? I don't know if we did this from episode 1. But, Mac, what have you been watching and playing? And chat, let us know what you've been watching and playing.
So lately I've been watching seasons 1 and now season 2 of Arcane. My sister-in-law was just like, have you seen it? And wants to talk about it. So rewatched the first season and now got started on the second season. That's most of what I've been watching. What I've been playing, though, a little bit of Skyrim, but mostly a game called Cyberhook. Which, if you kind of like, the idea of web slinging around in a way that's kind of Spider-Man-esque, but you also like a sort of, 80s, 70s synthwave vibe, then Cyberhook is 100% for you. There are a few levels that are painfully frustrating, but I've managed to almost complete the game, so having a good time. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
You know what? I haven't been playing a ton, but the stuff that I have been playing has been very meaningful. So a good friend of mine and friend of the show, who Mac is going to meet for the first time when he comes out for the Midwest Gaming Classic, gifted me a few games from the Fanatical sale. And one of the games he gifted me is called Gato Roboto. And I have never played it before, but it's a pretty solid Metroidvania that's very, very straightforward, black and white graphics. I think it's 4 hours to beat it. So I've been having fun with that. And then the only other game that I'll mention is I've dove? What's the word? I dived back in to virtual reality. And I've been having a lot of fun with the VR headset, playing some Pavlov. And it's interesting to see how far these games have come in the time that I just haven't really been into them. So VR is still alive, and I hope that they keep making games for it. We're still doing our Marvel watch through, and we're in the middle of the last Avengers movie right now. Chat is quiet,
Nice.
Mac, but what did they put in the chat today?
Let's see. So far, we've got Alex Mans playing Oceanhorn, Monster of Uncharted Seas, Genshin Impact, ZZZ, Tower Unite, and Party Animals. I've not heard of any of these games.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 331. We love doing this and hanging out with you, and we love every one of you who appreciates what we do and listens before, during, and after the fact. That doesn't even make sense because you can't listen before. But thank you for tuning in. Be kind, be excellent to each other, and keep it nerdy, y'all. Deuces.